Today you'll hear 5 of the scariest stories from Reddit this week. But first, thanks to everyone who supports the channel. Subscribe, leave comments, and hit the like button. Get comfortable. Let's begin. My neighbor is a maniac. My neighbor calls my children to the window at night. I'm 33. I live in Texas with my daughter Alicia, she's 8, and my son Jay, who's 4. Their mother dropped off the radar 2 years ago. No, she didn't die, she just turned out to be a complete piece of shit. So I've been doing just fine as a single dad. The 3 of us lived in a 2-bedroom house in a nice neighborhood. I have a stable job, and the kids are healthy, thankfully. Everything was going smoothly, until one night a couple of months ago. I woke up to Jay poking me in the face with his finger. He was crying hysterically. I could immediately tell it was the "I'm scared" kind of crying, not "I'm hurt," which calmed me a little. Jay is prone to nightmares, so I assumed that's what it was. But when I asked him what happened, he said, "The man from the next house is making scary faces at me." I'd heard Jay's stories about monsters in dark corners before, but this was new. I assumed he meant our neighbor, and the lack of fantasy details in his story unsettled me. It sounded too specific to be just a nightmare. I got out of bed and went with Jay to the kids' room. Alicia was awake on the top bunk. In the soft glow of the nightlight, I could see her lying there with her arms crossed, glaring irritably at her brother. I didn't turn on the light, I wanted to see the street better, and looked out the window. The curtains weren't fully closed, and apparently Jay had been looking outside through the gap. From the kids' room, you could see one side of the neighbor's house, the left side. There were 2 windows, both dark inside. I remembered the left one was the kitchen. I didn't know what room the right one was, the curtains there were always tightly shut. I asked Alicia if she'd seen anything. She shook her head. "He always has nightmares. He whines all the time. Dad, I don't want to live in the same room with him anymore. I never get enough sleep. It's not fair." Of course, hearing that made Jay cry again, so I took him to my room. He has this Ninja Turtles play tent, shaped like a van, and he actually prefers sleeping in it more than in his bed. Honestly, at the time I thought he'd made up a nightmare just so I'd let him camp in my room. Turns out, I was being a soft dad. He slept in that tent in my bedroom for the next 2 nights. On the 3rd night, I was woken up again. This time, it was Alicia. She was standing over me, shaking my arm. She hadn't woken me up in the middle of the night in years. When I asked what was wrong, she said, "The neighbor is making faces at me." Those words, and the fear in my daughter's voice, immediately put me on edge. "I closed the curtains when I put you to bed. You only opened them a little because you heard a strange sound." "What sound?" She couldn't remember exactly. She said she got out of bed to check, moved the curtain, and saw a light in the neighbor's window. The curtains in that far room were open, and the neighbor was standing right up against the window frame. And what was he doing? Alicia paused, then made a facial expression I never want to see on my child, or on anyone, ever again. It's hard to describe, but it looked something like this. First, she smiled impossibly wide, baring both rows of teeth with a gap between them. Then she furrowed her brow, tilted her head forward, staring from under her eyebrows, that Kubrick movie stare, and tensed her neck so hard the veins stood out. But the worst part was what she did with her hands. She raised her left arm horizontally and made a fist with her right hand, then started violently sliding it back and forth along her arm. She called it playing the violin. But it was obvious to me. The neighbor was miming slitting his wrists. Horrified, I told Alicia to stop immediately and never make that face or gesture again. I was furious and completely confused. My neighbor, a man in his 40s, was a bit withdrawn, but the few times we'd spoken, he seemed perfectly normal. I couldn't understand why he'd do something like this in front of my kids. After questioning Alicia further, I realized that technically, or at least legally, the neighbor might not have broken any laws. There's no law against making weird gestures inside your own house. But it was obvious he was targeting my children. Legal or not, I planned to have a very serious conversation with him in the morning. Before that, I asked Alicia if he'd made any other gestures. She nodded, then motioned with both hands, beckoning. "Come here." That night, Alicia slept in my room too. I checked the kids' window again, but like before, there was nothing. The neighbor's house was dark. The next morning, after dropping the kids off at school and before going to work, I knocked on the neighbor's door for a good 5 minutes. I knew he was home, his car was in the driveway, but he never answered. As I walked back to my car, I suddenly turned around to see if he was watching me. He was. For a split second, I saw him in the window before he ducked below the sill. Coward. I yelled at him to stop scaring us and drove off. That night, I put my plan into action. While the kids slept in my room, I stayed in theirs. It was Friday, and I was prepared to stay up all night to catch the creep in the act. I believed my kids, but I needed to see it myself before taking further action. I checked that the house was locked, pulled the curtains tight, put the kids to bed, and sat on the floor beneath the window in their room. Around 9 p.m., I started watching a show on my phone. I didn't use headphones so I wouldn't miss any sounds. I kept the volume low and read the subtitles. At midnight, the noises started. Just like Alicia said, they were hard to describe. The closest thing I can compare them to is a soft, repetitive clicking, like the sound people make when calling a horse. I knew one thing for sure. A human was making that sound. After a few minutes, the clicking turned into something like an attempt at whistling, but badly done, like someone was sucking air through clenched teeth. The sound was so clear that I realized the neighbor's window was open. That thought made my skin crawl. There were only about 5 meters between our houses. Certain he was at the window, and knowing this was my chance, I jumped up and yanked the curtain open. I saw him immediately. A dim light was on in his room, and there it was, that same horrific expression Alicia had shown me. Seeing it on a child's face was disturbing. Seeing it on a grown man was infinitely worse. His window was wide open, and he was sticking his arms out into the cold night, violently rubbing them against each other in a grotesque imitation of self-harm. When he saw me, and realized it was an adult man staring back, not a helpless child, he froze. The cartoonish grin vanished, replaced by something far more genuine. Rage. He grabbed the window frame, slammed it shut, and yanked the curtains closed. I dropped my own curtain. I felt slightly stunned by what I'd just witnessed. But there was one detail that disturbed me more than anything else. I wasn't sure the man I had just seen was actually my neighbor. I'd seen him so rarely over the years that I could barely remember his face. I was still sitting on the floor, blood pounding in my ears. I had enough evidence to call the cops now, right? Just as I reached for my phone, something slammed violently against the kid's window. After a moment of hesitation, I pulled the curtain aside again. The neighbor's house was dark. No one was outside. I moved the fabric further, and saw a handprint in the upper corner of the glass. This is important. Our house has a high foundation, and the window itself is very tall. Even though it's the first floor, a person outside would need inhuman jumping ability to reach that height. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. While explaining the situation to the dispatcher, I quickly moved through the house, trying to spot the man. My final stop was my bedroom. I locked the door, stayed on the line, and took my gun out of the safe in the closet. My heart felt like it was about to explode, but I knew I had to stay calm. Especially when I saw that Alicia was awake, staring at me from inside the tent. I whispered to her that everything was okay, but she needed to stay very quiet. I sat on the edge of the bed, weapon ready, listening to the silence. The kids' tent stood in the corner of the room, and to the left of it, directly across from me, was the window. After endless minutes of waiting, I saw something. The night was cloudless, and the moonlight was bright enough for a shape to bleed through the white curtains. At first it was blurred, but it sharpened as the person outside stepped right up to the glass. Somehow, he knew exactly which room we were in. The silhouette didn't move for several minutes, and I prayed that Alicia wouldn't see it from where she was. Then something happened that my mind simply refused to accept. The figure stepped back from the window and raised its arms, forming a Y shape. But the arms were wrong. They were far too long, at least twice as long as they should have been. Each arm looked nearly as long as the body itself. For a split second I thought he was holding sticks, but I could clearly see hands at the ends of those limbs. 5 fingers on each hand, dangling limply as the impossibly long arms reached toward the window. I jumped to my feet, ready to fire, but at that exact moment, the night was torn apart by the wail of sirens. The figure outside slammed its palms against the glass one last time. Then, as if someone had sliced its arms clean off at the elbows, the forearms detached from the body. The figure bolted away before they even hit the ground. When the police knocked, I opened the door and explained everything. The officers, a man and a woman, asked a few questions about the neighbor, likely to establish probable cause for a search. Then they told me to lock myself inside and wait while they checked the neighboring house. I watched from the kids' window as they knocked. No answer. They tried the handle. The door was unlocked. They exchanged a look and went inside. I don't know what they saw in there. I only know that when they came back out a few minutes later, both of them looked deeply shaken. I stepped onto the porch to ask what happened, and the female officer said curtly, "Your neighbor is dead." The rest of the night passed in a blur. Strangers in uniforms went in and out of the neighbor's house. Some came over to ask me questions, but no one gave any answers. They worked quietly and efficiently. At one point, I walked around the side of my house and saw forensic technicians photographing something on the ground beneath my window. Before I was ushered away, I caught a glimpse of the horrifying outline of 2 human hands. We've been living in my parents' apartment with the kids for several months now. Everyone, even Jay, is exhausted from the cramped space. But we can't go back to that house. Alicia is too traumatized. And I can't sleep there knowing that the killer is still out there. I want to sell the damn place. But our story went semi-viral online. And that's made everything harder. Because who would want to buy a house that news articles now permanently associate with words like dismemberment, torture dungeon, and a victim barely recognizable as human? The woman in the trees. Choosing came down to a gym membership or hiking. God, how I wish I'd chosen the gym. After breaking up with Carl and a long period of shameless self-pity, I realized something had to change. I needed to get back in shape and feel human again. I chose hiking for 2 reasons. First, I'd never been a nature person, and I wanted to prove to myself that I could handle the challenge. I'd gotten too comfortable in my relationship, too used to convenience. It was time to leave my comfort zone. Second, I liked the idea of being alone. I needed time to think. Well, thinking didn't really happen. But I left my comfort zone completely, farther than I ever thought possible. After spending an indecent amount of money on hiking boots, a backpack, and other gear, spoiler alert, none of it ended up helping. I chose a trail about 45 minutes from home. I arrived at the trailhead early in the morning. The air was fresh, invigorating, almost cleansing. I stopped by the ranger station to check in. 2 men greeted me. One was older, with thick gray eyebrows and a gray ponytail at the back of his head. The other was younger, closer to my age, around 30, with dark hair slicked neatly back. "Good morning," the ponytail said cheerfully. "Beautiful day for a hike." I took his word for it. This was my first hike. I smiled and accepted the pen to sign the visitor log. The ponytail explained a few rules: stay on the trail, leave no trace, take nothing with you. Then he said something that made me uneasy. And we've got a bit of a problem in the park, he added. There's a drifter. A woman. She bothers hikers. We're not exactly sure. He was interrupted by a phone ringing from behind the counter. He raised a finger, one moment, and stepped away. The younger one, let's call him Slick, sat behind the desk the entire time, watching me with an unreadable expression. He didn't say a word until the ponytail left the room. Listen, he said quietly. It's not a woman. He knows that. He nodded toward the back room where the ponytail was on the phone. And I know it too. What I'm about to say might make you turn around, get in your car, and leave. And if you do, that's the smart choice. He lowered his voice to almost a whisper. If you see her, or it, or whatever it is, she'll be in a tree. She's always in the trees. She'll try to talk to you. Don't answer. Don't even look up if you hear a voice above you. But if you can't help it and you do look, under no circumstances should you speak to her. Pretend she isn't there. Turn around and go back to your car. Leave immediately. If you see her a second time, run. And if she starts climbing down from the tree. He paused. Pray. I stared at him, mouth slightly open in shock. I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. I'm only telling you this because, no offense, you don't look like an experienced hiker. His eyes flicked over my brand new, never-worn boots and the backpack belt cinched way too tight. And she seems to pick people like you. The thing is, he continued, she used to just watch. Now she... He stopped abruptly as the ponytail came back into the room. Slick looked at me with a heavy, serious stare. All right, the ponytail said. Sorry about that. You've got enough water, right? The trail should take 4 hours, maybe 5 if you go slow or aren't used to physical exertion. I nodded, my head still spinning. Of course, this was the moment I should have turned around and run back to my car. But the problem is, I'm incredibly stubborn. After the ponytail's hints and Slick's outright judgment of my inexperience, I was determined to prove them wrong. 10 minutes into the hike, I convinced myself Slick had just been trying to scare me. Maybe he thought my inexperience would cause trouble. Maybe I'd wander off the trail or try to pet a cougar. 30 minutes in, my boots started rubbing. An hour later, the air went from fresh and invigorating to thick and suffocating, and my left big toe throbbed with pain. I didn't know how long my stubbornness would last. A few minutes later, I found a bench and collapsed onto it. I immediately pulled off my boot and sock. A massive red blister was swelling on my toe. Of course, I hadn't brought a first aid kit. I cursed myself silently, taking a long gulp of water. And then, I don't know how to describe it, I felt a presence. Instinctively, I looked down the trail, expecting to see another hiker rounding the bend. There was no one. I held my breath and listened. The forest was unnaturally still and silent, as if it, too, was holding its breath, waiting along with me. And then I jumped in terror. A flock of black birds exploded from the treetops behind me, cawing angrily as they scattered into the sky. Maybe it was the pain. Maybe the heat. Or maybe Slick's warning had finally gotten under my skin. Either way, I decided I was done. I yanked my sock and boot back on in record time, packed up my water, and got moving. The walk back to the car was supposed to take another hour, maybe longer now that I was limping, trying not to put weight on my left foot. A heavy, oppressive feeling clung to me, the certainty that I wasn't alone, that someone, something, was about to step onto the trail. Instead, I heard a soft greeting from above. And I looked. Of course I looked. Anyone would have. She was unnaturally thin and pale, perched on a low branch directly over my head. She wrapped her arms around the trunk, and it took me a second to understand why my brain was screaming. Her arms were impossibly long. They nearly encircled the thick tree trunk completely. My arms wouldn't have made it halfway. Her fingers were stretched wide across the bark, ending in dirty, claw-like nails. Her face is burned into my memory forever. Skin white as paper. Eyes pale blue, cloudy, far too large and set too far apart. Long, sparse hair, almost white, hanging down around her face. She was completely naked. "Does it hurt?" she asked in a dry, rasping voice, and she began to smile. I expected fangs. Instead, her mouth was filled with tiny, widely spaced teeth embedded in swollen pink gums, but they were sharp. Needle sharp. Like a crocodile's. Her smile widened as she watched my terror. And then adrenaline hit. Slick's words echoed in my head, "Go back to the trailhead. Get in the car." My heart hammered. Sweat soaked my neck. I started walking fast. I didn't know if turning my back on her was a mistake, but I could feel her eyes boring into the back of my skull. I broke into a half-run, teeth clenched against the pain in my foot. 5 minutes passed. Or 50. I don't know. God, please, I thought. Please don't let me see her again. My brain tried to rationalize what I'd seen, but I shoved the thoughts away. Fear dulls the senses, and I needed my mind clear to reach the car. It felt impossible, but somehow she was ahead of me now. I stopped dead. A pale leg slipped out of the thick leaves of a tree about 20 feet ahead. Then the other. She was climbing down. I bolted, ducking low and flying past the tree. A long arm shot downward, trying to grab me, but I twisted away just in time, narrowly avoiding her claws. I glanced back. She was already on the ground, on all fours. Her proportions were almost human, but horribly wrong. She began moving toward me, scuttling fast, limbs churning like a spider or a crab. She was terrifyingly fast. I knew I couldn't outrun her. I reached the clearing, the one I remembered being close to the parking lot. 5 more minutes, I told myself. Maybe I'll make it. Then I tripped. Pain exploded through my bloodied toes as I slammed into a rock. I hit the ground hard, hands first, and froze, waiting for the inevitable. I was certain she would pounce. I almost felt the impact. But nothing happened. Still on all fours, I slowly turned my shaking head. She was there, but she'd stopped. She let out a piercing, animal screech, but didn't come any closer. It took a moment to understand why. She wouldn't step into the clearing. She stayed at the edge of the trees, circling, watching, searching for a way to reach me. Sunlight. That was what saved me. 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind. I could stay in the clearing until someone came. But what if no one did? Night was coming. I knew the trail dipped back into the forest for about 300 meters just before the parking lot. Could I sprint through it if I pushed myself to the limit? With sickening dread, I realized I had no choice. Never taking my eyes off her, I began backing away. She remained in the shadows, watching. Calculating. 200 feet to the tree line. 100. 50. 10. I turned and ran. The trail sloped upward, and then I saw the parking lot. There was no relief yet. I was still in danger. But I had a target, and that gave me hope. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a white blur. I turned my head. She was racing through the trees, parallel to the trail, cutting me off. At that speed, she would intercept me before I reached the exit. I don't know how, but I forced every last ounce of strength out of my body. I heard her screech again, pure, animal rage and hunger. The moment I burst into the sunlit parking lot, I sprinted past the ranger station, fumbling for my keys with shaking hands. I nearly dropped them, but I got the door open, dove inside, and slammed the locks. I started the engine, threw it into reverse, and peeled out without even checking the mirrors. Slick burst out of the station, shock and suspicion written all over his face. I cracked the window an inch and screamed at him. "Get inside and lock the doors. Now." He hesitated for only a second, then bolted back inside and slammed the door shut. I shook the entire 45 minutes home. I don't know who, or what, that was. I don't know what she wanted. Or what she would have done if she'd caught me. But I know this. After that one hike, I never felt safe again. I constantly feel watched. I keep the lights on at home at all times. I avoid the shadows. My own shadow now feels like the only safe place left. A stranger treats. If a stranger offers to pay for your dinner, be careful when you leave the table. I work as a waitress at a diner somewhere in the Midwest. A few weeks ago, a customer appeared at one of the booths. I say appeared because I didn't see her come in, even though I usually notice the bell over the door. But it was a hectic evening. I walked over to take her order. She was sitting with her back to me. Her curly hair was styled in a way that reminded me of old movies. From behind, it was hard to tell her age, but she looked to be over 60. She sat perfectly still. Like a statue. When I walked around the booth and looked at her face, I gasped and dropped my pen. The woman wasn't breathing. Her lips were slightly parted. Her skin sagged and shriveled. No movement at all. Her chest didn't rise. But it was her eyes that gave her away. Unblinking. Unseeing. Sunken far too deep into their sockets. Oh my God, I stepped back. Then her head turned. In a dry, creaking voice, she said, "Just coffee, please." Her eyes blinked. Not dead. Oh, of course. Cream or sugar? Or black? I hurried off to get the coffee. When I glanced back, she was frozen again. When it came time to pay, she placed a $50 bill on the table. I started to explain that I didn't have change, she'd only ordered coffee, but she interrupted me. "That's fine, dear. It'll cover dinner for that nice family over there." She nodded slightly toward the family in the corner booth. They were regulars. Every Sunday, without fail. Divorced parents. Kids lived with the father, mother picked them up on weekends. Our diner was halfway between their homes, they met here to plan the week. They always tipped. The kids drew me pictures. "Really?" I said, surprised. "That's very kind of you." Without another word, the old woman stood and left. The family was delighted when I told them their dinner had been paid for. They asked by whom, and I told them about the elderly woman in the nearby booth. One of the kids looked where I pointed and said, "I didn't see anyone sitting there." Strange. The next time she appeared was several weeks later. It was past midnight. Again, I didn't hear the bell. I was wiping down the counter when I looked up, and she was there, sitting at the same booth. Still. Silent. Like a statue. I approached to take her order. I considered asking her about the family. I hadn't seen them since the night she paid their bill. Before that, they'd come every Sunday. After, nothing. As I neared the booth, the woman suddenly took a sharp breath. It struck me that until that moment, she'd been so still I wasn't sure she'd been breathing at all. She turned to me and said, "Coffee, please." Black. Of course. She wasn't talkative, so I went to get the coffee, trying to work up the nerve to make small talk and ask about the family. Before I could, the bell jingled. Carlos walked in. Carlos was a friend of my boss and stopped by from time to time. He ordered a burger, and we started chatting about his girlfriend and his girlfriend's boyfriend. I could never keep track of his insanely complicated relationships. Turns out he just adopted a dog from a shelter. He showed me pictures while he ate. "Carlos, I don't want to offend you," I said, "but that might be the ugliest dog I've ever seen." He laughed. "No one wanted her, so I took her." "That's sweet, but that thing looks like it has rabies." "Mange." "What?" "I'm joking," he said, "but she really does have mange." He started telling me how he rescued her. And that's when I heard someone clear their throat. I remembered the woman at the booth. Shit. I forgot her order. I hurried over with the coffee, set it down, and asked if she wanted anything else. She placed a 20 on the table and said it was for the burger of that nice young man. She never even touched the coffee. She simply stood up and walked toward the exit, ignoring me as I called after her. "Are you sure? Why do you keep paying for?" "Hey!" Carlos called out. "Who are you talking to?" "The woman." I turned around. She was gone. "What woman?" he asked. "It's just you and me in here. Are you okay? Are you high or something?" I looked down at the money in my hand. It was real. "Burgers on the house," I said. "Seriously? Thanks." He swallowed the last bite, jumped up, said he was late, and rushed out the door. I have no idea what kind of date someone goes on in the middle of the night, but that's Carlos. The next day, I found out he'd been shot. My boss told me. We were talking about his dog. I mentioned Carlos's mangy mutt, and his expression suddenly hardened. He told me Carlos had been attacked on his way to a bar the night before. He tried to fight off the robbers, but one of them had a gun. They shot him in the head, my boss said grimly. "Oh my God," I whispered. Carlos had been rushed to the hospital. He was hanging by a thread. Almost certainly going to die. And if he survived, he'd likely be brain dead. I was shaking. Deep, uncontrollable shaking. Poor Carlos. His poor girlfriend. His poor, ugly dog. And then the thought crept in. Was this connected to the old woman? And what about the Sunday family? They disappeared too. Something bad had happened to them. I decided that the next time I saw the old woman, I'd confront her. I wouldn't let her pay for anyone else. She came back that afternoon. The diner was quiet, between lunch and dinner. As always, I didn't hear the bell. One moment I was clearing dishes, the next she was there, sitting in her booth. I straightened up and approached her. Her sunken eyes turned toward me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was looking directly at death. Then she took that sudden, sharp inhale, like she'd remembered she was supposed to breathe. "Black coffee?" she asked. "And a root beer float," she added. I pressed my lips together, nodded, and went to get the drinks. I scanned the diner. 3 other tables were occupied, an elderly couple, a family with a teenage daughter, and a woman with a laptop. I should have taken the drinks straight to her, but instead, I made sure to serve everyone else first and drop off their checks. The couple paid. The woman with the laptop paid. Only the family remained. I finally brought the old woman her coffee and float. She didn't touch either. I stood tense, counting the minutes until the family finished eating. The old woman cleared her throat. I ignored her and rushed to the family, asked about dessert. They declined. I cashed them out quickly. Only then did I return to her table. She placed a $10 bill on the table. "Root beer float for you." A chill ran through me. How did she know that was my favorite? "No," I said. "I can't let customers buy me drinks. It's against the rules." "I insist," she said. "I'll bring you change for the coffee." She started to stand. "Actually, wait. I'll pay for everything myself." I dug into my pocket, slapped $10 on the table. And the coffee's on the house. I took too long. She frowned. Accept the gift when it's given. No. I can pay for the drink myself, even if I didn't drink it. And the coffee is free. I took her $10, held my breath, grabbed her parchment dry hand, and pressed the bill into her fingers. She exhaled, and left. I didn't turn around as she passed me. I didn't hear the bell. But when I finally glanced over my shoulder, she was gone. Relief washed over me. Later, dinner rush began. The bell rang. It was them. My regular family. It wasn't Sunday, and I hadn't seen them in so long that I was stunned. I cleared their usual booth and sat them down. When I went to take their order, I blurted out how much I'd missed them. "Oh yeah," the father said. "It's been crazy. After the last time we left here, we were driving together. I don't know if you remember how bad the rain was, but the car hydroplaned and we lost control." "You lost control," the mother corrected. "Yes, I lost control, because it was that minivan I told you not to buy. The ones that flip easily. And it did. We spun out on the highway, went over the guardrail, and rolled. I swear my soul left my body," one of the kids said. "It was awful," the mother added. "We just couldn't come back here for a while." "Were you hurt?" I asked. "Just some bruises," she said, smiling. "The police said it was a miracle we all survived." I nodded, relieved beyond words. They said the kids had been begging to come back, so they finally did. After taking their order, I called my boss to tell him. He was happy, and then told me he had good news too. Carlos was waking up. He was out of the coma and recovering. "That's amazing," I said. But something clicked in my head. I'm writing this instead of going home. I can't stop thinking about the old woman. About how she looked. Like death. Or maybe almost death. I keep thinking about how Carlos took a bullet to the head. How that family should have died in that crash. How all of them survived by some miracle. And I think I made a terrible mistake. I'm afraid to leave the diner. Because I didn't let her pay for my drink. I don't want to know what happens next. It wasn't just a rash. It wasn't just a rash. Strangely enough, I had no plans that Saturday. I'm not an outdoorsy person, but I didn't want to rot at home on a long summer day, so I decided to go for a hike. Well, hike is generous. I planned to walk a trail on the edge of town. I packed a backpack, drove out, and parked at the trailhead I'd passed 100 times. The moment I stepped into the forest's shade, warm air wrapped around me. I breathed in the scent of trees and earth. No one else around. Just rustling leaves and my footsteps. Silence. Isolation. I thought I'd made the right choice. At least, that's what I thought then. Even though it was my first hike, something like excitement took over. So when the trail opened up to a shimmering lake I didn't even know existed, I did something wildly out of character. I stripped, folded my clothes neatly on a log, and stepped into the water. The sun was relentless, but the water was shockingly cold. I swam for about 20 minutes, drifting toward the center of the lake, until I realized I was pushing my luck. Anyone could show up. I got out, let the sun dry my skin, got dressed, and headed back. I felt proud, like I'd become one of those people who love hiking. On the way home, I noticed the rash for the first time. A red spot on my leg. Inflamed edges. Slightly swollen. About the size of a large coin. A bite, I figured. An insect bite. I brushed it off and avoided staring at it too closely. The next morning, it was bigger. The red circle had expanded to the size of a golf ball and stood raised above the skin. It didn't itch. It didn't hurt. But I couldn't forget it. Over the next few days, my hand kept drifting toward it without me realizing. I touched the growth again and again. It felt both alive and dead. And then, more than once, I could have sworn it moved. By the end of the week, the rash had grown to the size of a baseball. Dark red. Swollen. The skin stretched tight to the breaking point. I could have sworn I felt something moving inside. That's when I went to see Dr. Rodney. He was cheerful, plain-spoken, and kind, the sort of doctor you aren't afraid of. I expected him to prescribe an ointment and send me home with a few reassuring words. But the look on his face when he saw my leg said otherwise. He muttered, leaning closer. Let me check something. He came back with a device that looked like a magnifying glass, except instead of glass it had a small round screen. When he passed it over my leg, he whispered a single word, almost to himself. Carrot. Then he looked at me. Randall, he said, and all the warmth drained from his voice. Did you swim in a lake, Jim? I didn't know the lake's name, but the fact that he asked confirmed everything. Yeah. I swam in some lake last week. Rheincorp should have dealt with this mess years ago, he muttered, pacing the office nervously. You're infected with a parasite. It's called a carrot. I looked down at my leg, at the bulging red membrane, and tried to imagine what was growing beneath it. Can you remove it? I asked. He shook his head grimly. That's the bad news. Carrots anchor themselves around major arteries and organs. If disturbed too early, they can cause catastrophic damage. He must have seen the terror in my eyes, because his tone softened slightly. But we can handle this, he said. Here's what you need to do. He laid out the rules carefully. Put your swim trunks in the car. Don't shower. Don't go near water at all. When you start feeling the urge, an overwhelming need to get into water, strong enough that you can't resist, it means the carrot is almost ready to emerge. The moment that happens, call me immediately and come here, no matter the time. I tried to ask questions, but Dr. Rodney kept his answers vague. I think he was trying to protect me, but it only made things worse. I tried Googling carrots. Nothing came up. Whatever this was, it wasn't normal. Over the next few days, I tried to live as usual, as much as I could. But I spent hours staring at the swelling on my leg as it grew more grotesque by the day. It wasn't just growing, it was moving. Sometimes I could see a dark mass sliding beneath the stretched skin. It took every ounce of willpower not to grab a knife and cut the damn thing out myself. Anything would have been better than being an incubator for that thing. The days crawled by. By Monday, I felt what the doctor had warned me about. The pull toward water. At first it was subtle. But the moment I recognized it, I changed into my swim trunks, jumped into my car, and sped toward Dr. Rodney's clinic. By the time I pulled into the parking lot, the craving was so intense I nearly dove into the decorative fountain out front. I didn't even think about how insane I must have looked, bursting into a doctor's office in swim trunks. Dr. Rodney was waiting in the lobby. He immediately led me to a back room. In the center of the white-tiled room stood a large metal tub, already filled with water. Get in, he ordered. I didn't need to be told twice. I wouldn't have lasted another second outside that tub. The urge was unlike anything I'd ever felt. What happens now? I asked, turning toward him. But all I saw was the door slamming shut behind him. My heart dropped. Hey! I shouted. A small window slid open in the door, and Dr. Rodney's face appeared. I'm sorry, Randall, he said. There are safety protocols. Infection risks. I can't be in the room with you, but I'll stay right here and guide you through everything. I wanted to argue. I wanted to jump out of the tub and pound on the door. But my body simply would not allow me to leave the water. I swallowed hard. Okay, I said. What do I do? "The carrot will start emerging soon," he said calmly. "It releases a powerful anesthetic, you won't feel pain. But whatever you do, don't touch it until it has fully left your body." I focused on breathing. Slow. Deep. I could feel the thing inside me moving violently now, though the swelling was still sealed. Then something pressed from inside against the top of the bulge on my thigh. The skin stretched until it turned white. Something black pushed outward. The skin split. A thin ribbon of blood drifted into the water. I shuddered, grimaced, but couldn't look away. A thin black appendage emerged, worm-like. I gripped the edges of the tub to stop myself from grabbing it. It kept coming. A long, slick, flat body slid out of my thigh, slow, agonizingly slow. My nerves were shot. I breathed in ragged gasps, staring as the thing left my body. At least 2 feet. Maybe more. Then the tail slipped free. I broke. I panicked. I reached for the carrot, now floating near my knee, and tried to fling it from the tub. That was a mistake. The creature, which had been moving lazily, snapped tight the instant I touched it. In a fraction of a second it coiled, lunged, and sank into my arm. I managed to throw the thing onto the tiled floor, but not before it tore a chunk of flesh from my forearm. Bleeding from both arm and thigh, I scrambled out of the tub and slammed against the door. "Let me out!" I screamed. "I can't open the door while the carrot is alive," Dr. Rodney replied calmly. I turned. The carrot was changing. In the water it looked like a worm. On land, it grew limbs. 4 black appendages split from its body, 2 functioning as legs, the other 2 writhing beside a gaping mouth. It hissed. Its sharp teeth clicked. It stared at me. On the table, Dr. Rodney shouted, "There's a bat. Kill it, and this ends." I grabbed the bat, never taking my eyes off the monster. It didn't move. Shaking, I stepped closer, raising the bat over my head. It snapped its jaws, twisted, but stayed still. Then, when I was within striking distance, it jumped. Faster than I could react. I missed. It latched onto my calf. Pain exploded through my leg. I kicked, trying to shake it loose, but it clung like a vice. I swung wildly, hitting myself as often as the creature. Finally, one blow landed true. It released me. Summoning everything I had left, I brought the bat down again. And again. Green sludge sprayed everywhere as I smashed the thing into pulp. At last, shaking and gasping, I dropped the bat and broke down sobbing. Dr. Rodney entered moments later. "I'm sorry I had to surprise you like that," he said. "I didn't want to frighten you beforehand. But you did very well." I mumbled something, barely intelligible through my hysteria. "Let's patch you up," he said. After 15 stitches, I left the clinic and drove home. And even though I'm grateful to be rid of the carrot, my thoughts keep returning to that lake. From time to time, a strange, insistent urge rises within me. To go back. And swim again. A door where there should be a wall. My family insists there's a wall there. But I see a door. And I'm starting to think they're not lying. They're just trying to protect me. I don't know where else to post this. A friend told me people here are more open to strange things. I need to write this down, get it out, because I feel like I'm either losing my mind, or I've stumbled into something very serious. Maybe both. It started, or rather, I first noticed it, when I was about 16. We'd lived in the same apartment my entire life. An old pre-war building. Thick walls. High ceilings. A layout that felt like it was designed by someone who hated straight lines. My room sat at the end of a long, narrow hallway branching off the living room. It was always the darkest part of the apartment. The ceiling light never quite reached that far. At the very end of the hallway, just past my bedroom door on the left and a small closet on the right, was a blank wall. Or at least, it was supposed to be. For everyone else. For me, there was a door. It wasn't black. Or twisted. Or ominous. That was what scared me more. It was a plain wooden door with a flat panel, painted the same cheap, dirty off-white as the rest of the apartment. But it was wrong. The frame was slightly too narrow. The brass handle slightly duller than the others. It didn't belong. I knew this with a deep, instinctive certainty I can't explain. If you measured the building from the outside, then measured our apartment from the inside, there would be missing space. A room-sized void. The first time I tried to open it, it was simple curiosity. I was walking to my room and froze in front of it. My hand reached out. Fingers wrapped around the cool, smooth metal of the handle. It was real. I felt its solidity in my palm. Before I could turn it, my mother's voice cut through the silence from the kitchen. "Sweetie, dinner's almost ready. What are you doing?" "Coming," I called back, my hand still gripping the handle. I heard her footsteps. The soft shuffle of slippers on wood. She turned the corner. Her smile vanished for half a second. The look in her eyes was pure, endless exhaustion. "What are you doing?" she asked quietly. "Just wondering what's in there," I said, nodding at the door. "I don't think I've ever seen it open." She blinked slowly. "Seen what open, honey?" "That door?" She followed my gaze. Her eyes settled on where my hand rested. She looked at me. Then at the wall. Then back at me. Her expression twisted into something painfully confused. Like the way you look at a beloved dog that suddenly can't walk. "You're standing in front of a wall," she said gently, but firmly. "Come on. Dinner's ready. You must be tired." She didn't wait for an answer. She simply turned and walked away. I stood there for another moment. My hand hovered in the air, where the doorknob had been just seconds before. I looked again. It was still there. The door. The frame. The handle. I could see fine cracks in the paint. I reached forward again, and my fingers slid over cold, rough plaster. The door was gone. There was only a wall. I shook my head. Cold sweat ran down my neck. The room spun. I told myself it had to be stress. School. Lack of sleep. I went to the kitchen, ate dinner, and no one mentioned it again. But it didn't stop. I'd walk down the hallway, and it would be there. Sometimes I'd catch it out of the corner of my eye. Sometimes I'd stop and stare straight at it, heart pounding, trying to force it to stay, to prove I wasn't losing my mind. But the moment I tried to focus, to really interact with it, someone would intervene. My younger sister was the most blunt. One afternoon I was standing there, just staring at it. My heart was racing. She rushed past down the hallway, phone in hand. "Are you okay?" she asked without looking up. "What do you mean? You do this all the time. You just stand here like a creep, staring at the wall." "It's weird." "It's not a wall," I whispered. "It's a door." She finally looked up, irritation flashing across her face. "Oh my God, move. You're blocking the hallway." She shoved past me, bumping my shoulder, and disappeared into her room. I turned back. The door was there again. Solid. Silent. But the worst reaction came from my father. It wasn't confusion like my mother's. It wasn't irritation like my sister's. It was quiet, deep anger. The kind that felt like it was hiding something else. One night I couldn't sleep. The apartment was silent. Everyone else was asleep. I slipped out of my room and walked down the hallway. Moonlight from the living room barely reached this far, casting long, warped shadows. And in that half-light, the door looked more real than ever. I swear I could smell dust and stale air leaking from behind it. I took a deep breath and reached for the handle. My fingers were inches away. "Don't." His voice came from the darkness behind me. I spun around. My father stood at the far end of the hallway, just a silhouette against the faint light. I couldn't see his face. "Just go to bed," he said. His voice was flat, emotionless, but there was a weight in it that made my blood run cold. "There's nothing there for you." "But I can see it," I pleaded. My voice broke. "Dad, there's a door." "There is a wall," he cut in, stepping forward. "You're tired. Your mind is playing tricks on you. Go to bed. Now." I didn't argue. Something in his tone made it clear, this wasn't a discussion. I slipped back into my room and lay in bed, shaking. I'd never seen him like that. This wasn't a father sending his son to sleep. It was a guard forcing a prisoner away from the perimeter. That was when the sound started. At first they were so faint I blamed the pipes. Or the neighbors upstairs. A soft scratching, like a mouse behind plaster. But it always came from the same place. From behind the door. Then it grew more frantic. More deliberate. Like fingernails clawing at wood. I lay awake, pressing my ear to the wall of my bedroom, trying to understand it. I told myself it was rats. Big rats. But I knew it wasn't. One evening, while doing homework, I heard it. A voice. Muffled. Indistinct. But unmistakably human. Crying. Short, desperate sobs that cut off abruptly. I jumped from my chair and ran into the hallway. The door was there, bright white in the dim light. I pressed my ear to it. My hands were shaking. Silence. "Did you hear that?" I shouted. My voice echoed through the apartment. My mother appeared from the living room, book in hand. "Hear what, sweetheart?" "The crying. It came from here." I slapped my palm against the flat surface of the door. She sighed. That same tired expression crossed her face. "There's nothing there." "That's Mr. Henderson's apartment," she said softly. "He's 90 years old. Maybe his TV was on." "That didn't sound like a TV," I insisted. "It sounded like someone was in pain." My father joined her, standing beside her. He stared past me, at the wall. His jaw clenched. "Stop this," he said quietly. "You're upsetting your mother." "I'm not trying to scare anyone. I'm telling you what I heard." After that, the sounds became more frequent. The pleas grew clearer. "Help me," the voice whispered, thin, trembling, seeping through the wood. "Please. It's so dark in here." Sometimes it was a man's voice. Sometimes a woman's. Sometimes it sounded like a child. I was the only one who heard it. I tried recording it on my phone, but all I got was static and the low hum of the building. I became a ghost in my own home. I lost weight. I stopped talking at dinner. I spent most of my time in my room, headphones on, trying to drown out the whispers from the end of the hallway. My family started treating me like fragile glass. They spoke in soft, careful voices. My mother left meals outside my door. My sister stopped teasing me and simply avoided me. They tiptoed around me, and it was suffocating. They thought I was losing my mind. Eventually, I started to believe them. The breaking point came a few days later, when I returned home after my first semester of college. I thought leaving would help. That distance would reset my brain. But the moment I stepped into that hallway, it was there. The door. As if it had been waiting for me. That night, the sounds were worse than ever. It wasn't whispering anymore. It was screaming. A high, thin shriek of pure terror that went on and on. I ran from my room, hands over my ears. "Don't you hear that?" I screamed. "How can you not hear that?" My parents were in the living room, watching TV. The television noise was completely drowned out by the screaming in my head. My father stood up. His face was pale. My mother was crying silently. "Make it stop," I begged. Tears streamed down my face. "Dad, please. You have to do something." He walked toward me heavily and grabbed my shoulders. His grip was iron. He looked straight into my eyes, and his own were filled with a familiar, terrible pain. "Listen to me," he said quietly. "You have to be strong. You have to ignore it. Just block it out." "I can't," I sobbed. "It's too loud." Then he said the words that changed everything. He leaned closer, lowering his voice to a harsh whisper. His eyes burned with desperation I had never seen before. "I know," he hissed. "You hear it louder than your grandfather ever did." The screams in my head stopped. The world went silent. "What?" I breathed. He realized what he'd said. His grip loosened. He stepped back. His face went ashen. I didn't mean." "What do you mean?" I demanded, stepping toward him as he retreated. "What do you mean, like Grandpa?" My mother was sobbing now. "Don't," she begged him. "Please don't." "Grandpa died of a heart attack," I said. The words tasted like ash. "That's what you always told me." My father didn't look at me. He stared at the floor. His shoulders slumped in defeat. This is the simplified version. It was like a dam broke. I followed him for days. I didn't let him rest. That single sentence confirmed everything I had experienced. I wasn't insane. It was real. It had happened before. Eventually, he broke. He led me into a small, dusty storage room at the back of the apartment, crammed with old tax records and broken appliances. From the very back, beneath a pile of moth-eaten blankets, he pulled out a small wooden chest. "Your grandmother gave this to me after he died," he said in a hollow voice. "She told me to burn it. I never could." Inside were my grandfather's belongings, old photographs, a service medal, a few letters, and at the bottom, a thin leather-bound journal. It belonged to his older brother. My great-uncle. A man no one ever spoke about. I took the journal and opened it. The first entries were dated shortly after World War II. He wrote about coming home, about looking for work, about living with his parents and his younger brother, my grandfather, in this very apartment. The early entries were normal. He wrote about the city. About a girl he liked. About misunderstandings with his family. Then the tone changed. He mentioned the hallway. October 12th. A strange draft at the end of the hallway behind my brother's room. Mother says it's just the old building settling, but the feeling is specific. It's coming from a door I don't remember. Simple. White. According to the building plans father keeps in his study, it leads nowhere. My blood ran cold. I kept reading. October 29th. Tried to open the door today. My brother stopped me. He laughed and asked why I was trying to walk through a wall. When I looked again, he was right. There was only plaster. But I know what I saw. I didn't imagine it. He's young. He doesn't pay attention. But I saw it. November 15th. The sounds have started. Scraping. I thought it was a rat, but it's too rhythmic. And last night, there was a voice. A woman, I think. Crying. Calling for help. I asked father if he heard it. He flew into a rage. Ordered me never to go to that end of the hallway again. He looked afraid. The entries grew more chaotic. The once neat handwriting devolved into frantic scrawls. He described the same whispers. The same pleas for help. He wrote about his family's denial. About how they insisted he was sick. That the war had damaged his mind. December 7th. They think I'm mad. They talk about me when they think I can't hear. They want to lock me away. But I am not mad. Someone is trapped in that room. I hear them every night. They beg me to let them out. How can my own family be so cruel, to leave someone suffering like that? They are the mad ones. Not me. December 21st. It's so loud now. The screams won't stop. I can't eat. I can't sleep. My brother, my own brother, looks at me with pity. He doesn't hear it. He doesn't understand. Only I can help them. The handle is so cold. But I know what I must do. The final entry was just a few words, written with such force that the pen tore through the paper. December 23rd. I must let them out. Tucked beneath the back cover was a yellowed, brittle newspaper clipping. A short article. It stated that my great-uncle had been committed to a state psychiatric hospital after an episode of acute psychosis, during which he attacked a wall in his parents' apartment with a hammer, claiming he was freeing prisoners. He died in that institution 30 years later. I closed the journal. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold it. I walked into the living room carrying it like a bomb. My father was sitting on the couch, his head in his hands. My mother sat beside him, holding his arm. They looked up when I entered. They already knew. This isn't an illness, I said in a dead voice. Is it? My father finally looked at me. His face was a mask of grief. No, he said. It's worse. It's something else. A presence. A burden. It attaches itself to one person in our family, every generation. It seems to choose sons. It chose my uncle. It chose my father. And now it has chosen you. He told me everything. He said his father, my grandfather, had also seen the door. Had heard the sounds. But after seeing what happened to his brother, he chose a different path. He spent his entire life ignoring it. He drank heavily. He was cold. Distant. He lived in a constant state of managed terror, fighting a battle no one else could see. Stress, my father said. That's what really killed him. Not a heart attack. Living with those screams behind the door wore his body down. It's a parasite, my father whispered, looking at me with pleading eyes. It feeds on attention. The more you focus on it, the more you listen, the stronger it becomes. The louder it gets. Your great-uncle tried to fight it. To open the door. That destroyed him. Your grandfather ignored it, and it poisoned him from the inside. I was lucky, he said, his voice breaking. It passed me by. I never saw it. Never heard it. All I could do was watch my father suffer, and pray it wouldn't happen to my son. Then he broke completely, spilling a lifetime of fear and guilt. You have to be stronger than they were, he sobbed. You have to live your life so fully, so loudly, that it drowns it out. You have to forget that hallway even exists. Please, he begged. You have to starve it. Let it die. Just live. Don't look back. I listened. I heard his words. I saw his tears. And a part of me, the rational, educated part, rejected all of it. A curse. A generational parasite. It sounded like fantasy. A far more believable explanation was simpler, and sadder. My great-uncle had suffered from severe mental illness. That trauma created a shared illusion, a piece of family folklore passed down through fear and suggestion. My grandfather likely had his own struggles. My father's anxiety manifested as denial. And I was simply the next man in line with a genetic predisposition to schizophrenia. That's what I chose to believe. It was the only sane option. I told them I needed to leave. Not them, but the apartment. The environment. I needed a clean slate. Together. Without history. Without dark hallways. My father argued. Begged me to stay where he could help. But I knew I couldn't. Staying meant accepting the curse was real. Leaving meant choosing sanity. I found a good job 1,000 miles away. The move passed in a blur of boxes and goodbyes. The last time I saw my father, he hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. "Be strong," he whispered. "Don't listen." My new apartment was nothing like the old one. A modern high-rise. Clean lines. Lots of natural light. Everything brand new. The first 2 months were perfect. Quiet. Blissfully, wonderfully quiet. I slept through the night for the first time in years. I started to feel normal. I was convinced I had made the right choice. I had escaped my family's madness. Last night, I finished unpacking the last box. I set up a home office in the second bedroom. It was late, and I walked from the office to the kitchen to get a glass of water. The main living space is open plan, but there's a short hallway leading to the bedroom and bathroom. A small, functional space. A blank canvas. And at the end of that hallway, where there should be a flat, featureless wall, there is a door. I froze. The glass slipped from my hand and shattered on the floor. It's the same door. Exactly the same. Plain. Flat panel. Painted a slightly brighter white that doesn't quite match the steel trim. The same dull brass handle. It was never the apartment. It was never the apartment. It was me. I brought it with me. I stood there for what felt like an eternity. Bare feet inches from broken glass. Eyes locked on the impossible door. My father's words echoed in my head. It attaches itself to one person. My phone vibrated in my pocket. A text from my father. Just checking in. Everything okay? I couldn't respond. I couldn't move. Slowly, trembling, I stepped forward. Then another step. I stood before it, before the impossible architecture of my personal hell. I felt a faint, cold draft seeping from beneath it. My father begged me to be strong. To ignore it. To live my life and starve it. My great-uncle's journal proved the cost of fighting it. But they never considered a third option. Not fighting. Not ignoring. Accepting. I leaned forward. My heart hammered like a trapped bird against my ribs. I pressed my ear to the smooth, cool wood. At first, there was only silence. Deep. Total silence. More unnerving than any scream. I held my breath, and then I heard it. A faint, rasping whisper. So close it felt like it was coming from the other side of my own skin. "Help me." My father wanted me to be strong enough not to hear it. My grandfather had that strength, and it killed him. My great-uncle fought it with everything he had, and it broke him. I don't know how strong I am. The only thing I know is this. For the first time in my life, there is no one left to stop me. That's all the stories for today, guys. Let me know in the comments which parts you liked the most. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next videos.